Welcome to Leaders' Questions, where Ireland's leaders face the heat, the pressure, and the toughest questions of the day.
During the general election campaign, you, along with TAOISEACH, Simon Harris and your ministers, repeatedly claimed that 40,000 homes would be delivered in 2024. This was a ploy to fool people into believing that you had made real progress on housing. Of course, we all knew it was bull. We now know that 30,330 homes were in fact delivered in 2024. That's less than the previous year and a far short of your 40,000 election brag. A failure, by the way, that's set to continue as the central bank says government will miss your housing targets for the next 3 years. So you and your colleagues cynically misled the public on the key issue of housing during the general election. When this ploy was exposed last month, your defence was that the claim of 40,000 homes in 2024 wasn't a promise, that it was a forecast that ended up being wrong. In other words, an honest mistake. But now we have the truth. The government knew in advance of the general election that you hadn't a hope of hitting 40,000 new homes for 2024. Just days before the general election was called, then Finance Minister and Fianna Fáil Deputy Leader Jack Chambers was handed an important report by the Department of Finance, and that report laid out in black and white that 40,000 homes would not be delivered. Now, Taoiseach, nobody could seriously believe that the Minister would have kept that information from government on the eve of an election. It was too important, so I assume he shared it with you. What I know is that Minister Chambers did not tell the public. On the contrary, 2 days after receiving this report with the general election underway, he made the claim that government was on course to deliver 40,000 homes. And this untruth was repeated by you, by Simon Harris, by Darragh O'Brien, again and again throughout the campaign. It's not lost on anyone, Taoiseach, that last week, as Minister Chambers was caught out for misleading the public at home, you were sitting in the Oval Office laughing about Ireland's housing crisis. The American president stated that the housing crisis is because Ireland is doing so well, that it's a good problem. You replied, "That's a pretty good answer, Mr. President." Well, Taoiseach, do you think it's a pretty good answer for people locked out of home ownership, for renters crucified with rip-off rents, for young people unable to get a start in life, choosing between staying at home with their parents or going to Australia? Do you think it's a good answer for mothers and fathers forced into homelessness, for children being raised in B&Bs and in hotel rooms? Your sniggering interaction hurt a lot of people, Taoiseach. You made light of their suffering. So government misleads people on housing at home and then laughs at them while rubbing shoulders with the powerful abroad. VideoParliament Oireachtas na greibh ann a chur I Gael agus iad ag muomh as 4 míle teach nua I 54. Agus ach anois tá an fírinne nóachtaithe. So, Taoiseach, do you recognise the hurt caused by your laughing with the American president about the Irish housing crisis? And will you now accept, will you now admit that you knowingly misled the public with your claim that the government would deliver 40,000 homes in 2024?
Well, dúspáir an ní tíim an éair leis an hachta as ochtan méad a dúirtí. Níl éon áras ach an ábhar is táchtaí agus is práineach sa tír seo ná cuasaí taíochta agus an príomh aimimetá going mar rialtas ná níos mó tuthe a chrathú agus é sin a dhéanamh chó tapig is féidirling. Sin bunagus bár polisathe an rialtas seo. Could I in the first instance say that housing is the #1 issue in this country. And in the White House, in the Oval Office, I made the following comment. I said the #1 issue in Ireland is housing. We've got to build them We've got to build more houses. We've got to build them faster to give the young people of Ireland an opportunity to buy a house or to afford to rent a house. It's a pity, Deputy, you didn't quote that in respect of how I addressed the housing issue in a serious and substantive way when I was asked a question during the press conference in the Oval Office. And I've consistently said during the last government and in this government that this is the #1 issue. You will choose to play politics with it on an ongoing basis. You choose not to go to Washington. A big mistake in my view. You choose not to meet people to discuss a whole range of issues that you will habitually raise in this House, but hadn't the courage or the guts to go to the US and meet your own interlocutors and discuss those issues with them. But on the housing issue, if I could, for a moment, there were a number of projections throughout 2024 in respect of completions. Now, we've exceeded targets, and particularly in 2022 and 2023, we exceeded central bank targets. We exceeded other targets who felt we would come in lower. That's the position. The first quarter of the following year is when the statistics come in. And there are a variety of publications, and data was published in September by Central Bank and others. But the Central Bank had come in lower in previous years. You know from EY Euroconstruct and others were predicting far higher numbers. It was extremely disappointing that we didn't make those targets in 2024. The overall Housing for All targets were exceeded in that 3-year period. But that's not enough. We have to build more houses and we have to build them faster. And the focus has to be on how we do that and how we get from 30+ houses, 1,000 houses a year to 50,000 houses a year. And I've yet to hear anything credible from you in respect of that challenge. And that is and when people make suggestions, as I have, in terms of the need for more private sector investment into housing in this country, it gets attacked in a knee-jerk fashion without any space or room for a meaningful or substantive debate on the issues or the modalities by which we get 50,000 houses built a year. Because that's what the ESRI is saying, that we need in terms of demographic pressures. In other words, population is increasing and more houses will need to be built. All the parties in this House agree on the demand side of the targets. In other words, I don't think there's big disagreement as to whether it's 50,000 or a variation of that we require per annum over the next 5 years. And we have a very clear programme in terms of government investment, which is the largest historically. We built more houses in the last 3 years than going back to 2000 in the early 2000s. We've built more social housing in the last 3 years than you'd have to go back to the 1970s to get the same scale of social housing new builds in this country, as well as provision. And we're going to continue to focus on that in terms of the delivery of social housing, affordable housing, and we do need to get more private sector investment involved.
Deputy McDonald.
So you're spoofing, Taoiseach? The Department of Finance analysed all of the available data that you have cited there and more. And the Department of Finance told your colleague, Minister Jack Chambers, that 40,000 homes in 2024 was not happening. And we have the documentation to reflect that fact. So Minister Chambers knew, government knew, I assume you knew, Taoiseach, and yet you went and spun the fiction again and again and again of 40,000 houses in 2024 to, as it were, take the bad look off things. Shame on you for doing that, for misleading people. And Taoiseach, it doesn't take courage to snigger at people. That to me is the action of an obsequious coward, in fact. That's a cowardly act, to snigger at the suffering and the hardship of people back home when you feel you're at a safe distance to do so. So I'd ask you to reflect on that and reflect on the fact that your sniggering caused real hurt. I think you should genuinely reflect on that fact. Maybe you haven't. I'd now ask you to do so and to accept also that you misled people in the general election campaign.
I think that's pathetic. You accuse me of spoofing. I mean, get off the stage. Come off the stage. No one was sniggering at any housing problem. You know that. You know that. It's pathetic, the protestations and your attempt to exploit that particular moment and so forth, and completely oblivious and refusing to reference the actual substance in terms of what I said in relation to housing being the #1 priority in Ireland. And whatever you do, Deputy, you can criticise my policies or our policies as a government, but don't be trying to say you have a monopoly of concern or empathy on the housing question. Everybody in this House knows it through their own communities, through the people we represent, that it is the #1 issue. No one is going to buy into your propaganda, your feigned outrage and feigned protestation. The bottom line is you didn't go to Capitol Hill, even though on other years you will ask us to advocate on your behalf, and that's the government of the day, which we did on many an occasion for Sinn Féin. But when it comes to putting the party first, as opposed to the country first, Sinn Féin will always put the party first.
Thank you,
and that's why you didn't go. That's why you didn't go to the US. On spurious grounds, you didn't go to the US. And no one is convinced about your false assertions.
Deputy
and so forth.
Flash, please.
Like, share, and subscribe, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.